Okay, so I'm gonna go in for another game analysis today, like I did yesterday. So, played another game today that I thought was interesting. We're sort of throwing up here, um, making a little content out of, and sort of seeing what do you guys think. So, before we get into it, just wanted to say a little bit about my philosophy on training games especially. So, for anybody who's trying to improve at chess, if you've looked around for different suggestions about what to do, a thing you often hear is the value of playing longer games, right? Um, Makes sense, right? The basic idea is if you spend an hour playing your part of a game, um, you've got more time to think over the moves, you've got more time to process sort of what's going on, and more ability for that kind of information to be stored in long term memory. You're engaging your analytical faculties more, and it's not so much like brute intuition. This is the argument for playing longer games as opposed to playing blitz games. It's an argument that makes a lot of sense to me. So as a result, I try to incorporate a lot of longer games into my play. For anybody who plays online, which is basically what I do, um, it's harder to find people who want to play longer games. Blitz is like really obviously popular. Um, so one thing that I've taken is kind of a uh, thing that I do is um, I play against not only humans, in the form of like playing on chess.com or something like that, but I also play against computers. Uh, People have different philosophies on this. Some people don't think it's the greatest idea, whatever. At my level, I don't really see anything bad that can come out of playing against computers, and they have the upside of being able to allow me to play a longer game. So, um, what I do is I play against the different sort of levels of the computer on the Chess Free app. So you can get this anywhere that you download apps. Uh, and this is an example of their interface for anybody who is not familiar, or maybe you have the app. This is just confirmation that hey, we're talking about the same thing here. Um, yeah, they have a setting on there where you can sort of put it at 60 minutes, where you have 60 minutes to play your moves, and a 10-second increment. So that's what I do. Um, and I'll play a few of those games a week, just as in an effort to kind of mix it up. And that's what I'm going to show you guys today. So I played an interesting game today against the computer. Right now I'm on uh, the 10th level, I guess, of um, the different levels they have on the computer. They say it's an ELO rating of like 1915 or something. Um, Supposedly that matches up to something like FIDE ratings or something. I don't know. It's not obvious the playing strength that the computer plays at. But at minimum, what it does is it gives you a feel for if you're playing within that app, what your progress is. So for me, I play against the level 10 right now. Um, I've got a slightly less than 50% win percentage, which means it's probably sort of the right amount of challenge given where I'm at. And once my ELO rating in the app itself goes above 1915, then I go up to the next level. So there it is. So that's just by way of background as to sort of what this game is that I played. So, you're not wondering, was this a blitz game or what was it? So all that by way of just sort of setting up where we are. So I had the white pieces today, and I've been in kind of like um, uh, a thing where I'm really trying to learn the London system. So I showed a game where I played the London system yesterday. I'm going to show another one today. Um, for the longest time, I had been playing probably like 8 to 10 openings in my repertoire, and came across the good suggestion that, hey, if you're being a jack of all trades, you're really being a master of none. So at this point, I've got like 3 or 4 different openings that I'm kind of working on for the time being, um, and the London is one of them. So yeah, this was a normal London game. Um, Nothing too terribly interesting to say. Again, I'm not going to comment a lot about move order in the openings. I think there's a lot out there on the London, um, in really any openings that I'm going to show you if you're interested. As I said, same thing as yesterday. I take back with the e-pawn. Again, the idea here is to introduce a little bit of an imbalance into the position, and specifically, you can stop black from playing knight b4 and harassing your nice d3 bishop. So I sort of like this way of going. Bishop g4, attacking my queen. Knight f3, a6, knight b to d2, e6, queen to b3, getting out of the pin, and importantly, pressuring black's b pawn. When black has moved their light squared bishop, um, out to the king side of the board, and then shut it out with the move e6, now this b pawn becomes a target in the London system. True for both white and black. Anybody who's sort of a player of the London is well aware of this idea. So knight a5, had anticipated this in advance. So my basic idea from here was, I was thinking, okay, I want to take my queen out. I want to pressure the b pawn. I do see that black has this move knight a5, but even in that case, I had prepared this move queen c2 with the idea that, hey, I've got a nice battery. Some days, I'll have possibly an attack on h7, and more importantly, now black's knight is sort of kind of silly looking on the side of the board, and they're going to have to waste tempi to fix that. So black takes on f3. I recapture, and then black in fact does have to go about wasting tempi to fix his knight's positioning. So at this point, I decide to jump into the middle of the board. Black captures, and again, now this piece has made 1, 2, 3, 4 moves just to be traded off. That's got to be good for me, I'm thinking at least. I recapture with the d pawn. In some situations in the London, you want to capture with the bishop in this kind of scenario, but oftentimes you can develop somewhat of an initiative, interesting attacking chances by recapturing with the d pawn and evicting the knight, which is what I tried to do here. Knight d7. So here was maybe, as far as I was concerned, on move 14, the first, at least for me, interesting moment of the game. If you just look at this position on its face, it looks like, hey, can't white just win a pawn here? Bishop takes h7. So in this position, if one might think, okay, well, black possibly has this idea of g3, or sorry, I apologize, g6, trapping in my bishop. This doesn't look like it could be good for black, because in fact I can just take this, right? And black can't recapture. This would be a blunder. White is totally winning in this position. Queen takes g6, king e7, bishop g5 check. Black is in a whole lot of trouble in this position. So black doesn't want to go in for that. However, in this position, you got to be careful, right? Black's got a double attack here. So hitting the loose dark squared bishop and putting a second attacker on the light squared bishop, and black is totally winning here. So you got to look out for tactical opportunities that your opponent has in a situation where you're like, hey, wait, am I just sort of winning material here? So bishop takes h7 doesn't work. I looked around at this position, kind of struggling to come up with a tangible move, and I noticed that if I played bishop g3, which in fact was what I went ahead with, then it looks like, hey, I'm renewing this threat. On bishop g3, if I subsequently can play bishop takes h7, there's no queen h4 double attacking a loose bishop, and the light squared bishop on h7, in fact, the dark squared bishop on g3 would stop queen h4, of course. So that was my general idea. As it turns out, this move is not horrible, but there was a better opportunity. So computer says something like queen e2 here, switching the queen over from c2 to e2 is slightly better. In some variations, you can obviously imagine black bringing a rook to the c file. You want to get your queen off of that file, offer some overprotection for the e5 pawn, which we can imagine might need it, being somewhat overextended. Bishop e7, short castles, bishop g5, and now the computer throws in a sort of quirky little bishop dance here. Bishop h4, bishop takes, queen takes, g3, queen d8, rook a1, and white's got a slight advantage here, with a slight space advantage in the center. Bishop over the knight in a position with pawns on both sides. Ever so slight of an advantage for white. But again, I played, instead of queen e2, I played bishop g3. Turns out it looks like I had somewhat of an advantage before this move, but after this, black is basically equalized. Black goes in for h5. I don't want black to be playing h4. And hitting my bishop, so I got to do something about that. I thought about h3, but I didn't like h4 after that. I'd have to play bishop h2. Now my bishop is, if I just put this on the board, my bishop is staring at this pawn. It's really immobilized. I wasn't a big fan of that. So I went h4 instead, shutting this down, with the idea that if black plays something like g4, I don't have to take it and allow black. I don't have to do this and allow black to, get some kind of initiative here, or probably even better, taking with the queen and sort of opening things up like this. Instead, my thinking was just to play something else. If black takes, to play something else, let's just say, for the sake of argument, not saying this is the best move, but castling long, if black takes, then I've got this, I'm okay. So I wasn't terribly concerned about the immediate ramifications of playing h4 in response, given black's possible replies. So black goes for rook c8. At this point, I play queen e2, again getting out of the way of the rook. Maybe a couple moves too late, according to the engine, in terms of trying to retain a small advantage. But again, this is more or less equal. G6 by black, A4 is what I chose to do here. This was a position where I was somewhat unclear as to what I wanted to do. I know that I liked my H rook looking at the H pawn together with my bishop. I can imagine this H pawn could become weak in some variations. So I didn't know if I wanted to castle short. I was nervous about castling long, given that black is close to cracking that open. So I was looking around for what was a way to improve my position. I came up with A4. trying to clamp down on black's queen side. Uh, as many of you probably have heard, there's just the value of pushing rook pawns. Uh, they seem to be a decent idea in a lot of situations, so I was like, yeah, let's go ahead and give it a try. Instead, computer says probably something like trying to get to safety with your king is a good idea. I was nervous about this, especially given the immediate um, possible breakthrough that black might have with something like d4. But computers, again, just really sort of lethal in terms of their imaginative ability. Say, just go ahead and play c4 um, and try to shut it down. Moving a pawn in front of your king with a rook um, on the other side of that pawn. And it's actually totally fine. This is a totally fine position for white. Turns out black probably wants to do something like knight c5, but again, I would have been scared in this position, at least initially, of a move like b5. But it turns out this is not actually that good for black. White can just sidestep with their king. Black takes on c4. White recaptures. Now white is putting pressure on a6. Black's king is uncastled, and white actually has a pretty strong advantage in this kind of position. So in this whole sequence where I'm thinking, how do I improve my position, and I'm thinking castling might not be as good of an idea, it was a case of kind of insufficient imagination on my part. Whereas I saw d4 could have been annoying by black, it might be a reason I didn't think about it more in terms of like, hey, could I push c4? Is that okay? And computer says that's totally fine. So interesting moment, I would say. a4, bishop a6, h6 by black, which incidentally, I had thought of this move actually back here. When I chose a4, I was thinking of playing something like bishop f4, but I thought I might get a little awkward if black played something like bishop e7, and I'm thinking, okay, am I doing this? There's a recapture, black's winning a pawn, or some weird variation. I thought I would become, in my effort to sort of shut black out of this diagonal, this pawn could become a little tender. You might try like g3, but still, I'm not convinced. Maybe black tries to break it open with something like g5, and then black's got a lot on this square. I'm opening things up again. I just felt really uncomfortable with this kind of move. So I passed on it, and instead I played a4, allowing bishop h6. And this move proved to be really annoying. The position of black's bishop, in this case, definitely proved to be really annoying. So I was immediately thinking, okay, how can I get rid of this? So I play f3 with the idea of going bishop f2, bishop e3, trying to trade off black's bishop. But computer says here you really should have taken the initiative to get your king to safety again. I'm not really sure ultimately where. Again, this is like move 18. We all know we need to castle early. I'm not really sure what I was thinking about my king at this point. I was probably thinking I was going to play something like king f1 and just have that kind of position where maybe someday I play rook h3 and bring the rook on the third rank or something. I just thought this was going to be a weird position without castling. But computers like here, maybe you do want to go ahead and get castled, not worry so much about this possible weakness of the h-pawn. And we get some line like short castling by black, rook f to d1, knight to c5, hitting the bishop retreats, a5, rook a b1, queen to b6, and it's a relatively equal position. In retrospect, yeah, I probably would have wanted to get my king to safety like that. But instead, again, instead of going for castling in this position, I played f3 with the idea of trying to try to get rid of this strong bishop. But black took the initiative, right? So knight c5. Now my bishop's under attack. What am I going to do about this situation? Bishop f2, I continue with my plan. And black starts to get really annoying. Hitting my e-pawn. And I'm starting to get tied up in this position. I got to figure out something to do. Long story short, the calculations I was doing, I was seeing that if I didn't eliminate this knight, black was probably going to win my e-pawn. So I was trying to sort of figure out a way to get around that. In particular, I was looking at if I didn't play bishop takes c5, so let's just say I played a random move like a5, right? I was thinking black was going to play something like knight b3, rook to a3, counterattacking. Then there's this fork, knight to c1. Interestingly, or importantly, the bishop, not like it's needed on c1, but this bishop's control over these important squares in my position makes this counter operation, especially if it were available for black to go to d2, something that black can do. There's a fork on queen and bishop in this situation. Queen's got to move. I don't know, say something like queen to d1. Black captures here, recapture, and then I'm losing a pawn. So I didn't like that, and it all seemed to sort of hinge around, other variations I was sort of looking at, hinged around this idea of, hey, I got to get rid of this knight. So I went in for bishop takes c5. Computer says you're probably going to lose a pawn anyway, so don't worry about taking off the knight. It suggests something like bishop c2, and actually suggests that black has to play knight to d7 as basically the only move, basically a pawn and a half or so better than other options in this position. The line continues with castling, g5, bishop to e3, again trying to finally get rid of this bishop. Black persists, rook c4, counterattack this rook, and take the bishop, recapture, and black finally wins a pawn. So I'm going down a pawn in any case. Not the way that I was originally imagining with losing this e-pawn, but white's position is not good here. So I did go for bishop takes c5 in any event. Black recaptures. And here, another sort of small mistake. There was nothing terribly tactically wrong or anything that I've done so far. It's just a little tweak, small mistake once again. This actually, as it turns out, according to at least chess.com's engine analysis at a depth of 26, was my biggest mistake. But even so, it was relatively minor, which is I played rook h3. And the idea here was, I'm not sure why I didn't do something with my king in terms of, we'll look at the computer suggest to move king f2 here. I'm not sure why I didn't do that. I think I was just trying to gain activity with my pieces, assuming these the f and the g pawn were going to eventually push, and I'd have sort of sweeping access to the third rank. And I wanted to stop, annoyingly, bishop g3, which in a lot of variations could be something that would be pretty unpleasant. So I went for rook h3, but again here, computer says king f2. It stops bishop g3, and it doesn't put my rook on a weird square. Queen b6, g3, rook b5 check, king f1, taking the pawn, and this is a cool tactical sequence. Bishop b5 check, capturing with the pawn, taking the rook, taking this pawn on g3, forcing a queen trade. The king comes up in the endgame, and white is up in exchange, but as it turns out, given that black has an extra pawn and black has a super active bishop, white's pawns are somewhat raggedy. Computer actually gives a pretty strong advantage to black in this kind of position. So it would have been better than the game continuation, but this sort of best play, black has still got a pretty nice advantage. And when I say nice advantage, something like uh, minus zero point 0.8 to minus 1, so almost like a healthy pawn advantage despite being down in exchange. Um, or, okay, so I played rook h3. Computer responds with, again, free chess free. The program responds with queen c7. I go g3, trying to evict the bishop. The bishop takes the pawn, um, as they can now do. But in any case, I want to get this annoying bishop out of here. Bishop g7. And if we look at the resulting position, I got to about this point in the game, and I was like, oh man, what is going on with my king side? How did I do this? What is my king doing? I don't really have queenside castling anymore. Um, by not castling, surprisingly, we get to move 23, and what is this? Like, this is so weird. I kept thinking, okay, my king's going to go to f1, it's not going to castle, but, it just turned out to get into a weird position. We want to not break these general principles and get too smart for ourselves. I think this game is a really good example of that. But again, I would note, um, after this move, rook d1, um, I have not done anything terribly nuts at this point. I haven't made any massive mistakes, just small little tweaking errors. We're talking about inaccuracies at best. Um, Nothing major at all. And the computer at this point says black is totally winning, with a minus 3 point advantage. Um, so yeah, I mean, what happened? For anybody who wants to offer a comment, let me know. Can you pinpoint a moment in the game where, I did something equivalent to hanging a rook? Um, I don't see it. I've went over this game a couple of times now, and I don't. I mean, I see the small positional sort of tweaking mistakes that have kind of added up, but oftentimes if I lose a game, it's because there's some big error, and we're not seeing that so far. So black continues castling, queen f3. Um, so I was thinking about how do I get counterplay, and my only idea here was, obviously I don't know in the game that I'm minus 3 at this point, totally losing. Um, but I have a feel that, hey, this is not good, and so I'm thinking, what kind of counterplay can I get? I want to push g4, open up the g file, try to get some counterattack on black's king. But of course, if I play g4 at this point, black just has queen takes f4. I'm losing more material. My position is getting more raggedy. So I've got to do something about that, right? So queen f3. Black goes in for d4, trying to open up the position. Makes total sense. I didn't really see anything better here than taking the pawn, and so that's what I went for. Black played the really, I thought, compelling move, rook c1. I'm in a bind here. I try to force black's hand, double attack the rook. I know there's this check on a5. I don't really see what else to do. Black goes in for the check. Queen d2. And if you look at a lot of these moves on the engine, at least according to chess.com's engine analysis, at, again, a depth of 26, I'm playing most basically correct moves for this position here. I'm, again, not making any massive errors, but black is just keeps coming. So black takes the rook. The queen is pinned, of course, so the king takes. Black takes some more material. My king is dancing around in the center for some reason. Black takes more material. I'm down 2 pawns at this point. I'm thinking, hey, if I've got any chances, we've got opposite colored bishops. Just don't try not to lose any more material. Reposition your rook. Maybe you can, survive a few more moves, and we'll see what happens. Rook to d8. Black pressurizes the bishop. I can't really move this central structure anyway. So I tried to do something about my rook, and black immediately plays this really strong move, queen d5, not only attacking the rook, but basically forcing something like my next move, uh, rook g1. I've got to stop, queen g2, with check, trading off the queens, putting me in an awkward position, or at least queen g2 getting into the position. This was not pleasant at all at this point. Black plays e5, opening it up even more. F takes, queen takes check, and again, you look at this with computer analysis. Again, chess.com's engine at depth of 26. I played the best move here. Queen e3, trying to just alleviate some of the pressure. Queen takes, king takes, and the last move of the game, bishop d4. Black is winning. Black is winning my rook. This is totally lost. I resigned at this point. So yeah, I mean, the reason that I wanted to show this game was usually, especially if I'm playing against humans, say, on chess.com, then when I lose, I know the obvious reason that I lost. Here in this game, it's really hard to figure out why I lost. And if you look at the game tracker on chess.com, the sort of report that they put out, this is it, right? So I start off all the way up until about the move bishop g3 on move 14, I believe it was. I'm building up a decent advantage, and then things slowly start to chip and slip away. And it wasn't immediately obvious. I mean, maybe this move rook h3 was not terribly great, but it wasn't horrible. And again, according to chess.com's analysis, I have 2 inaccuracies in here, and one of those inaccuracies was way here at the end when I'm totally losing anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So yeah, I guess if you're going to get beat, it's good and instructive to get beat like this. This is the way that I look at it. I don't really, not a huge fan of losing games where, hey, you just hung a knight. Like, that was stupid. Don't do that. This is instructive, at least as far as I'm concerned, in terms of, like, what are these little positional mistakes? This is where you need to sort of take the next step and up your game. So, interesting game, I thought. If you guys have any thoughts in terms of sort of how it went wrong, because it wasn't obvious in the game, it wasn't obvious in the analysis of the game. To me, when it went wrong, let me know. Anyway, hope you guys got something out of this, and yeah, looking forward to making more content soon. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.